Is there any public comment on this item? No members of the public are present, so other than Mr. Baker, do you have any comment, Mr. Baker, on this item? He does. On the naming, okay, all right.
Come on up anyways, you're next on the agenda.
Well, now it is time for you. Item 6 is approval of a change order for electrical value engineering reconciliation.
Okay, there are two change orders that are before the board tonight. Both are in excess of the board limit of $83,500. I want to point out that these are actually, however, these are reconciling some value engineering items. The math is a bit not complex, but I want to describe it very carefully. These have more to do with work going from one subcontractor to another than actual increases in project costs. So I want to explain how these work. If you recall, it was just about a year ago, about 10 months ago, we had to do some...
Can I just interrupt you to say, yes. So you're going to be talking about item 6 and 7 together?
Yes, is that okay?
That's fine with me. Just let
Apologies.
me make the public announcement that
Okay.
we're handling item 6 and 7. 7 is approval of a change order for the traffic signal sidewalk improvements at 53rd and San Pablo.
Correct.
Okay, go ahead, please.
There were, part of our value engineering items back in August of last year were for mechanical, electrical, and plumbing systems savings goals. So we tasked the team with saving 5% of the total cost of these systems. And one item was the goal of saving 5% of the cost of electrical systems, which would be $273,000. The timeline was such that we had to include that target in Turner's contract, and then the design team and construction would work together to realize savings. And then once we realized that savings, we would reconcile things. So we did not identify specific items at that time. The design and construction team has had a series of meetings over the last few months to identify those savings. To date, the team has identified a savings of $159,345 to fundamental electrical systems. This is actually all the guts of the building. This is conduit, electrical panels, savings in labor. We've figured out ways to do things more efficiently, shorter runs of conduit, ganging panels together, doing more efficient runs of routing things. So things that you don't see and don't decrease the value of the project at all. But even then, we managed to save about $160,000 in all of that. So that's good news, because it's not things like cheaper light fixtures or fewer light fixtures or things of that nature. And this is working with the electrical engineer and the subcontractor, Moore Meadows, to identify those things and kind of negotiate down parts and pieces. The team is still working on additional credits for things that you do see. And this is the kind of more visual stuff, like interior light fixtures. The deletion of the cafe had some electrical things. We had to redesign how the electrical worked in the library. Site lighting fixtures, specifically in the community hub. And deletion of some spare conduit that we don't need throughout the project. We're still in the process of working on those items and negotiating those items. We think there's at least $50,000 more to save for those items. However, the electrical contractor is just about to start roughing in electrical on the site. They have a credit of $273,000 in their contract. To date, they've only saved $149,000. We've saved $160,000. We're still working on more, but in order to get them contracted and moving on the rest of the work, we need to reconcile most of this value engineering item. And so what we're proposing tonight is that the delta, which is $273 minus $159,345, is $113,655. That we proceed with that to get their contract work in place, so they can start actually spending money and putting the guts of the buildings in, while the team works on some of these other savings items, or the things that can come later in the schedule. So they've been very good. The contractors worked to date at no cost, putting a lot of hours in to realize the savings. And so we're recommending that we do this so that we can show good faith that we're moving forward with the majority of their work while we work on saving some of these other things which come later in the project. And so that's what this item is. So before I want to entertain questions on this, again, the value engineering goals, what we're now doing is we're identifying the actual scope and identifying the real savings we're going to have.
So the specific request is to recommend approval of $113,000 in the change order.
Right.
So that they can go ahead and do this work.
Correct.
And later you think we might, you might be able to save another 50,000.
Yeah, we will,
approximately.
there will be
Which we- so
savings,
there-
and
so
what we'll
we
do is
still-
we'll come
we
back
didn't
with-
hit, we won't hit our 273.
Probably not. I think we're going to end up at probably about 225 or so.
Okay.
And the rest will come from contingency. So as we come back, we'll come back to you, probably as ratification items because they'll be smaller. For credit, we'll have credit items. For example, right now, the interior light fixture savings looks like is about $13,000. The spare conduit looks like it's another 14. We're still negotiating that. We're still trying to improve upon that. The electrical contractors are getting a bit nervous, understandably. They've done all this work at no cost, and now they're going to start actually putting physical work in now at fairly rapidly. So we want to reconcile the bulk of the savings we've realized so far, and then as we proceed, we'll do credits for these other items.
Okay. And if we're short the 50,000 or so, because we hit 225, not 273, that'll come from contingency?
That's correct.
Okay. What is, can you remind me, I ask you this every time, what was our starting contingency and how far have we tested?
Yeah, there are two contingencies.
Yeah, I know.
There's one in Turner's contract. They're both, the district controls both actually, but they're used for different purposes. And the only difference really is the markups. It's a bit arcane, but the one in their contract is used to clarify discrepancies in the drawings, clarify details, things of that nature. That is about 1.4 million. There's also 2.1 million that is the district's contingency for use for whatever the district chooses to do so, and that's for design changes and also unforeseen conditions like some of the work on the street and lead paint abatement, things like that. They're different, but the bottom line is there's $3.5 million in the approved budget for contingency.
Okay.
To
This-
date,
This would fall in the 2.1 category.
that
I
is
think.
correct. That's correct, because it's more or less discretionary.
Right.
I want to point out that to date, we've executed change orders in the amount of about $275,000, and we're over a third of the way through the project. So I think we're in good shape. You'll see it when I talk to city schools next week, is that we've spent a lot of time, rolled our sleeves with Turner, trying to identify everything we possibly knew about now for the whole project. And we came in at, I think, about 1.2 million. I'll describe that at city schools next week. So we're doing pretty well, I think. And so, I think that it is prudent to show goodwill back to the electrical contractor so they can get moving and not be uncertain about putting work in them not getting paid for, to do this while we continue to work with them to realize more savings. So that's where we're at right now.
Okay. Other questions on this item?
I have-
Yeah.
Mr. Baker, the way the contract is written, it's a lease-back method.
Yes.
And so this 273 value engineering is basically in the allowance or in the, I know it's a value engineer line item. How was that arrived at as far as in the relationship to the lease-back, as far as how the subcontractor, the electrical in this point, in this condition, is using that allowance?
It's a great question. It is a credit allowance of $273,000, and it was calculated straight up of 5% of their contract value. So we want you to do better than this. Get to 95% of your costs. We're going to work with you to get down to that number. So it's a credit allowance. So they can see what the thing is. They're going to start putting in more work than their contract is, which is why they want to reconcile this now as we continue to work for more savings. So that's really what, does that answer your question? Okay.
No other questions?
Member Dice, any comments, questions? No. Public comment? Okay, why don't we take item 6 before we move to item 7? Do we have a motion to approve item 6 change order?
Move approval of item 6, change order request.
Second.
Roll call, please.
President Affelt,
Aye.
Vice President Dice,
Yes.
Member Merriam,
Yes.
Member Pats.
Yes.
The motion to approve change order electrical value engineering passes 4-0.